Alright, yeah. That's gotta be racist.
Episode 2. What if, what would happen theoretically if the first overall team took, if a team took, a 7th round prospect? Welcome back, everybody. Path to the Draft, episode number 2. If you guys did not see episode number 1, you can go check it out. We talked about our top 5 receivers, top 5 quarterbacks, went over some other topics. But today we are here for episode number 2. As always, it is your trusty hosts, Kian McDermott, Charlie Nidell. You can follow us on social media. As always, make sure you're following our Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We post a ton of content, but make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms. Today, we will be going over top 5 edge rushers, top 5 corners. We have a new segment called Sell the Prospect, where we're going to be trying to sell the prospect, a certain prospect, to each other and then also to you guys. So comment down below if we end up doing that successfully, and obviously some other topics along the way.
Feeling good. Got some work in on this draft. We're really pumping out the work for the draft. At least, man, scouting these players is so fun. I love watching the NFL, but scouting, watching film, this stuff's so fun to do. Watching these players perform at such top levels in the draft. Some of the guys we're going to talk about today are just, some incredible athletes.
Yeah, let's get straight into it. So, Charlie, we're going to talk about our top 5 edge rushers. Basically, me and Charlie have different lists. So I basically do my list. Me and Charlie for edge, we have exactly the same list with players. It's just we have different rankings, and I think we have our 5 are different. But number 1 is Will Anderson. Is the number 1 edge prospect. I've heard a lot of teams have Tyree Wilson, who we'll talk about, as their number 1 guy, but Will Anderson is the best edge rusher in this class. You look at the production this guy had in college, 34.5 sacks, 2-time best edge rusher I forgot the specific award name, best edge rusher in college football, winner. This dude is a fantastic, fantastic player. When you look at Will Anderson, why is he just, to you, and maybe he's not, I guess I haven't really heard that opinion, to you, the out-and-out edge number 1 in this class?
This is the best player in this year's draft class. I completely agree with you. This guy is absolutely ridiculous. Best player in the class. I've got him graded really freaking high at a 97.62.
I have a 94.5.
This is our last year's, for me, it was Kayvon Thibodeau. For a lot of people, it was Aiden Hutchinson. This is Chase Young. This is an unbelievable prospect who his numbers were sort of down last year, and that came with 10 sacks and 17 tackles for loss. I don't understand how that could be a down year for this guy. In the run defense, this is the best player in this draft. From the edge, potentially even when you include the run stuffers at D tackle, this is the best run defender in the class. His hand use is excellent. The technique is just about perfect. He gets up and under 6'7", 6'8" tackles who are NFL bound at some point and just kind of bullies them. He knows exactly how to control his body, his hands, his movement, and there's nothing about this prospect that I think is a downside. This guy is good at everything.
I'm high on Will Anderson. I'm not as high as you are. Obviously, I think this guy is definitely the edge 1. I think Tyree Wilson over him is absurd. I think this dude's definitely the edge 1. There's no question there. I love Will Anderson. I think this guy, the profile he has athletically matches very well to Khalil Mack. When you look at being able to turn speed into power, there are just not many rushers who are able to do that. This guy is a power rusher. Line him up on the outside, let him get inside. This guy is a pure edge rusher. That's what he'll be drafted for. This guy will be drafted for the production he can give teams in terms of sacks. You look at all these guys. Will Anderson is a sack getter. He gets to the quarterback and he sacks the quarterback. I don't agree with you with the best run defender. I think he's good. I don't think he's elite. I think he's good at run defending. I don't think that's what he'll be drafted for. But yeah, you look at his rip and push. He just has this profile that screams elite edge. The length as well, 34.5 inch arms. That's exactly what you have, and it's actually a edge class that has very long arms. But that's what you want. Able to get up into that chest. His leverage ability is fantastic. Again, and I think it'll translate. That's what I see. I think this guy will translate to the next level.
Very well.
It's funny because we always talk, the number 1 player in whatever position group we talk about is always the shortest conversation.
Yeah.
Because we know what we're getting. So we'll talk more about the next guy. But we'll go to the number 2 prospect who you have at number 4 actually, and that's Nolan Smith out of Georgia, who I have as my number 2 edge rusher. This guy to me is the best run stuffer in the class. A guy who very, obviously good for him. Weighed in at 238 as he was 235, which is very much small. This dude looks smaller on tape than he is, 6'2", 238. Obviously a senior. I mean, this guy is the best pure bendy edge rusher in the class. I think he has the most bend, the most finesse. This guy was fantastic on a Georgia front that for the past 2-3 years has, pumped out just, defensive monster after monster. I really like this guy. Ran a 4.39. That's ridiculous for an edge rusher, especially. It's not like he's a big dude. Obviously thinner than a Will Anderson and then like a Tyree Wilson. But this dude I think is fantastic. High motor. And you see, unlike a lot of the other edge rushers, this guy drops into coverage a lot. I was watching his tape against Missouri, like almost the beginning of that tape, half the snaps he was dropping into coverage. So you can kind of use him to fake him in as he's going to rush the passer and drop him inside to kind of fake out the quarterback and be using a lot of disguised zone coverages. So again, he offers a bunch of that. I think he is a little confined to what he'll play. I think this guy is ideally, an outside linebacker.
Yeah, a 3-4 outside linebacker.
3-4 outside linebacker.
Likely.
I think he would, struggle a little bit at that pure edge rusher where I think Will Anderson is much better at. But again, and another thing I loved about this guy is you look at all the write-ups and the draft profiles, like his teammates respected him so much. They saw this dude as a leader. They saw this dude as a role model. Obviously, he's a senior this year. And a lot of, they saw him as someone to look to in the locker room, which I love. That generally you can see translate into the NFL. But again, kind of like we'll talk about Will McDonald. Again, these are all edge rushers we'll get into. It's just when he tries to rip under an offensive lineman, if they can get that leverage, he's easily pushed down and knocked out of plays. So he doesn't have that beefiness that some of these other guys do. But I love Nolan Smith. I really, really like this guy. I think I have him valued at a top 20 pick. But for me, the ranking goes from I have Will Anderson at 94.5. I have Nolan Smith at an 89. So the drop off for me is not considerable, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, to highlight some of the points you bring up about Nolan Smith, this is a guy I have as my edge 4 position, and honestly I was expecting to have him a little higher. He's gotten a lot of hype recently. He ran extraordinarily well at the Combine. He performed like a true athlete at the Combine. But for me, his athleticism can only get him so far. He is the smallest edge rusher in this year's draft class. Of everyone, not just of these top 5. This is the smallest edge rusher in this year's draft class, standing at 6'2", 238, and he can't change the height. And the weight's going to be hard to change to keep the speed the same, and the speed is what sets him aside from everyone else. As you said, Keaton, he's an athletic freak. Okay, his bend when he gets around those offensive tackles is freakish. You don't see that from edge rushers, ever. I mean, this is like Hassan Reddick type.
Yeah, I
think that's the comparison for Nolan Smith. But I think, for me, this is not the prospect I love. He is super fast, but he's just too small. Offensive linemen get faster in the NFL. And Nolan Smith is able to do his thing at Georgia. He only came up with 3 sacks all season. This is a star-studded Georgia line. I know they split sacks. They split everything. But only 3 sacks for Georgia on a dominant defense, 7 tackles for loss, and I'm actually not as high on him in the run game as you are. For me, this is not the best run defender because he's too small to defend the run.
But
he is better utilized as a gap-plugging linebacker in the run game.
Which is why...
But they don't utilize him that way. And if he's going to play as a 3-4 outside linebacker, he's not going to be utilized to, plug the gaps. And I think that's where this is not going to be a 4-down player in the NFL. I think he's too small to be a 4-down player in the NFL. I don't think that they will use him except for 3rd-down pass rushes. At least in the first few seasons until he can work on that. He's too easily dominated in the run game. I think tackles stay the same size from college to the NFL, and they get faster and better. And for me, it's going to be, while it's not going to be as hard of a transition for Anderson and Wilson, it's going to be a harder transition for Smith being as small as he is. He's going to have a harder time getting around the edge, a harder time getting to quarterbacks, and a harder time bullying his way through through O lines at 6'2" to stop the run. For me, I do like this prospect. Don't get me wrong. I've got him graded an 85.71, so almost an 86. This is a good player, and this is a first-round pick for me. But this is a back-end first-round pick because of the potential that is there. Right now, I don't think he translates to the NFL.
I disagree because if you look at the tape, Nolan Smith has been dominant in the run game.
Not always.
You look at what the profile for a good run defender is, either a huge defensive tackle or it's those freakish athletes who are, like Aaron Donald, fantastic run defender. Fletcher Cox, like looking at guys like that, obviously the big defensive tackles, but you need to have that fluidity in your game. Like, you're not going to get that from Tyree Wilson. You're not going to get that from Will Anderson at that level that Nolan Smith gives you because he has that fluidity in his hips, obviously not as big. But, I mean, you look at size. Besides weight, him and Will Anderson are only an inch separated. And, again, size is different. Power is different. But I think the size for Nolan Smith, to me, is not as much of a question mark, especially if he's plugged in as a 3-4. This guy can rush the passer, and is, I think, going to be arguably drafted more for that run stuffing game. I really like him. I think this dude is out and out the best run defender, and I think that where people take his size against him, this is what goes for him in the run game, is the size, because he has the fluidity I think a lot of these other edge rushers don't.
Just a small part I disagree. 6'2" does not concern me. Aaron Donald is 6'1", 6'2". Yeah. Aaron Donald is small in that sense. 238 pounds. It's just not big enough for me. In the run game in college, it might have worked, but he is. I'll give it to him. In the run game, he is a great tackler. He is not going to miss tackles, or not many. He didn't miss very many in college. I don't expect him to miss many in the NFL. But if you put him in a short down situation, let's say a 3rd and 2, and you line him up as an edge rusher, and he's not upright, he's not going to win. You've got 6'8", 350-pound tackles in the NFL who can't match his speed, but if this is just a halfback dive, just going straight up the middle, they're just going to push him.
But that's the thing.
He's not weak, and he's not.
I feel like you're looking at it wrong because that's true. But again, like I think I agree. I think what we're saying you can use as a pro and a con. Like obviously, that size will matter, but obviously it gives him that speed. And NFL, as much as obviously the NFL tackles are better, they're more fluid, they're faster. There are very few that are able to be at 6'8", 6'7", 300 plus pounds to be as shifty and have the hips like it. Like, I mean, Penei Sewell's one of those guys, and he's not even 6'8".
But that's the difference you get in the NFL. I think there are just so many more tackles that you get.
He's more fluid, he's bendy, so he can use that speed. His get off is fantastic to just warp around defender, warp around offensive linemen.
He can, there's no doubt, and that's why I have him there for the potential. But it's just the second a 6'6" plus, 320-pound plus offensive lineman gets a hand on him, the play's over.
But
if Nolan Smith can get not literally, but if Nolan Smith can get around the edge, yes, you're going to have a hard time keeping up with him. But if he is just slightly off the mark, or if an offensive lineman knows what's coming, because he is, and we haven't talked about this yet, a relatively one-dimensional pass rusher. A lot of these guys are. A lot of them are, but they have power. So they can use Will Anderson can use his straight arm, and he can put it into a counter move. He can put it into a speed rush. He can put it into a power rush, a bull rush, any kind of rush. Will Anderson, he's not he's not amazing at every single one, but he can use all of them. Nolan Smith can't just bull rush a 6'7" offensive lineman. His first, on almost every single pass rush, his first instinct is to run around the side. And if an O-lineman can see that coming, Nolan Smith has his spin move, which it's actually a really good spin. It's a fluid spin. And it's a second resort. He needs to incorporate more pass rush moves to really be involved in games. And I think a lot of the reason that we're seeing him mocked to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who have Hassan Reddick, is because he's not ready to start in the NFL. He's not.
I feel like
he needs to sit and he needs to learn behind someone similar to him, like Hassan Reddick, and I am 100% sure this guy can develop into a great NFL pass rusher. Not right now. He's not NFL ready for me.
All right, we'll take it on to my number 3, Tyree Wilson, Texas Tech, who you have obviously as your 2, so we kind of flopped there, but opposite of Nolan Smith. This dude is, I've never seen an edge like this guy. 6'6", 261. This dude's gigantic. That being said, just because of what we just talked about with Nolan Smith, I am going to not talk more negatively about Tyree Wilson, but kind of bring up what I thought a little bit more. This dude has the most C+ grades I've given any of the pass rushers in my top 5. I think this guy offers you power, and I think that's it. Not a very diverse pass rush, not diverse pass rush moves. He's a bull rusher, and he's a vicious one. This dude is, you can argue. I feel like just because Will Anderson's profile is bull rushing, I guess you can argue Tyree Wilson brings a little bit of power, but I don't understand how Will Anderson would compete against a guy who's 6'6", 261. I think this guy translates much more. This guy's not a pure edge. This guy's a 3-4 tech guy at the next level, a 3-4 edge, and even then I could see this guy lining up in the interior much more, but I mean, violent bull rusher. This dude is a violent bull rusher. But again, I watched this game against NC State, and I didn't love what I saw. Tyree Wilson to me, I was like, okay, I'm, going into my ranks, I was like, I think it's going to be, I knew it was going to be Will Anderson at 1, and I was like, I think it's going to be Tyree Wilson at 3. Or at 2, excuse me. Like, I had that set in my mind, and I sat down and watched him tape, and obviously, yeah, he has a bunch of good stuff. He, an offensive lineman, if you step wrong, this dude will set you on the floor. But I think what I saw a lot from him is if an offensive line is able to get under his pads, he's neutralized a lot. He's not very shifty. He's not the type of guy where if they're running the ball to the other side of him, he kind of gives up. He's not going to go and look for the tackle. That being said, I do think this guy will get drafted higher than Nolan Smith because of his physical profile. We haven't seen one like this. I don't remember the last time I've seen a guy this big as a defensive, as an edge. But yeah, I think besides that, he has great power. He has a good first step. I'll give him that. But the hips are a little tight, not as athletic as the other guys. But again, how can you kind of put that on him for the size he has? I do like him. I think just coming off the Nolan Smith, we were talking about that. They obviously offer 2 very different things. I'm going to completely disagree with you here. Tyree Wilson, is my number 2 edge rusher in this class, and I'm going to surprise you with my grade because it surprised me too. I was honestly expecting to have Nolan Smith at my 2, really loving his speed. And then Tyree Wilson burst onto the scene. I've been seeing him mocked in the top 5, top 10 which
consistently.
I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm not.
And I was just confused because I think this is a guy who Will Anderson could have potentially been the number 1 overall pick last year in the draft. We're seeing a lot of Nolan Smith at Georgia this year. But Tyree Wilson, we didn't see a lot of this year at Texas Tech. He had a quiet 61 tackles, 7 sacks, 14 tackles for loss. Very good stats for a D lineman, the second best just behind Will Anderson. And he surprised me. Watching his tape, I saw one of the best players in this draft class. I came in with a grade of 95.24. This guy falls at number 3 currently on my big board. This is a powerful edge rusher. And he clocked in at 271 on the weight at the combine, 10 pounds heavier than he had previously clocked in. And you're right, he's not as fast as Nolan Smith. It's obvious. He ran a 4.8 240, which it's not slow for a 6'6", 271-pounder. It's not fast, but where I think he does make up for it, 4.82.
Yeah, it's
not slow, but it's not fast. It's in the 21st percentile of edges, but he's also the biggest edge in this class by a margin.
Ever.
Where I think this guy, clearly makes up for it, his quickness. He's not as fast, but he's just as quick as the best. He is always the first to make contact. When you look at these edge rusher versus offensive tackle matchups, the first player to make contact generally wins the rep. Tyree Wilson is able to get one hand on and under the pads of offensive tackles on 99% of the snaps that he takes. The highlights I watched, the scouting, the film I watched, this guy does not lose. Now, it's a Texas Tech defensive line. He's double teamed on a lot of plays. He's able to rip right between 2, and his power combined with his quickness just creates someone that you don't want to have to block because you never know what's coming. I think the pass rush moves, it's very diverse. He has the power, but he also is able to counter moves. Once he gets an arm across an offensive tackle, the rep is completely over. Because no tackle is going to be able to recover when a 6'6", 271-pounder is on the wrong side of them. The second he's on the wrong side, it's over. Second he's got two hands on him, it's just about over. And I think Tyree Wilson does it the best. He is, I have him a, prolific run defender, prolific pass defender, and for me, it's this guy, his athleticism just, it stands out. To be 6'6" and not playing defensive tackle, he's got to be doing something right. And I think this guy is a freak at edge rusher. I mean, you said it, the strongest player in this draft class. And
and again, it's nothing against.
For me, this is a almost generational prospect considering his size.
Yeah, I mean, I like him. I just think he's very, he offers one thing, and obviously it's elite, and we don't see that. But I think, I think it depends on the team, because some teams don't need that, some teams do. And again, you can look at it that way where he goes into the NFL. The obviously the tackles are better, and I think if he were to get, I think I've seen him mocked most to the Lions, which obviously that would be very, very scary. But he's going up against some good tackles. But yeah, I like the Leonard Williams comparison here, actually. And I was going back and forth between that comp, just because you don't see guys this big. I've seen a lot of Marcus Davenport. But
seeing Montez Sweat type things. Montez Sweat is faster than Tyree Wilson.
And probably smaller.
But no, Montez Sweat is, I believe, 6'5".
Yeah, that's actually.
But Tyree Wilson is deceptively quick. Right, he's not.
Get off is good.
He is not going to run a fast 40-yard dash. We know that he's 6'6". He's not going to run a fast 40. It's just not possible. But he still finds a way to beat tackles around the edge with a speed, with just a pure pass rush move, just getting around the edges. That shouldn't be possible for someone at 6'6", 271. But somehow Tyree Wilson makes it possible.
Yeah. We'll move on now to number 4, where we have Will McDonald, obviously out of Iowa State. Big dude, 6'4",
not that
239,
big.
Not big, excuse me. Slender dude. Here's and I have to pose this question. If you're saying those things about Nolan Smith, how have you had Will McDonald above him when he's taller, and I think he's the same weight? So where is the... If you have Nolan Smith and he can't translate, how do you have Will McDonald rated higher?
Will McDonald, I actually have, my grading system's a little strange. You'll have to bear with me. I give Nolan Smith a 4 on run defense. It's not out of 10, don't worry. 4 is actually quite a good score. It tells me he's NFL ready. But for me, I have Will McDonald also graded at a 4 for run defense. I don't think that this is a guy who's going to thrive in the NFL as a run defender. The difference for me is in the passing game, Will McDonald can line up all over the place. I think Nolan Smith is going to be exclusively a 3-4 outside linebacker, where Will McDonald's extra 2 inches provides him, he played 4-3 edge, 3-4 outside linebacker, and 4-3 D tackle for Iowa State.
The thing is, though, and this is what you look at it, Iowa State, first of all, very weird defensive scheme. This guy is in no way this guy is not effective at all in the inside. This guy's a pure... Harold Landry type guy, like bendy, really good. He's the Madden player in us. Like, we like him. Like bendy. He's a fan favorite. You can see why. Bendy, really good. Like, he has a very unique physical profile, but he's a pure bend, finesse edge rusher like Nolan Smith. I think they're pretty comparable there. But Iowa State, like, this guy had very minimal reps on the outside, whereas that's what he's going to be. Like, there's no way this dude will be in any way effective against an inside offense.
But I think that the production that he offered playing defensive tackle was 5 sacks, which is more than Nolan Smith, and that's only going to increase when you put him out on the edge. The biggest difference for me between McDonald and Nolan Smith...
We don't know if those 5 sacks were on the inside or on the outside.
No, but
those are both.
For me, the biggest difference between these two prospects is technical ability. Nolan Smith is super raw, super athletic, super fast, and a very good player in his own right. I know we've talked about it. For me, Will McDonald offers more. He's better with his hands. His first, he makes early contact, and it's good contact, and he's able to sort of, push offensive linemen more than Nolan Smith is. He does more with his hands. He does more technique-wise. He lines up in more techniques. Nolan Smith will be solely utilized as an upright 3-4 outside linebacker.
And I think if people
McDonald's going to be able to use other techniques. McDonald will use the 3-tech, the 1-tech, the 5-tech. He'll be able to use more.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think I think Will McDonald at the end of the day, I think this guy will be more useful as an outside linebacker 3-4 schemed type of dude. I guess he's a little bit more. I mean, we just didn't see him at edge that much. Iowa State really, I forgot what the stat was, but he had half as many snaps as all the rest of the edge rushers. But again, the Nolan Smith has really set us off here, just because I really like Will McDonald. I don't want it to get it skewed like that. I really do like him. Another prospect where you look at a lot of other big boards, we're two people who have him a lot higher. A lot of people don't have him in the top 5. But yeah, again, really super. And I'm gonna again go back to Harold Landry, a guy who is so productive because of that bend. And really good grip and rip. Again, like Nolan Smith, definitely better handwork against offensive tackles. But again, another guy like Nolan Smith, there's no getting against it. When you're that weight and you're slimmer, I like to watch games. I watch him against TCU, and again, a guy where you see him bend. Either he gets the first step on you and he warps around defenders, or he warps around offensive tackles. He is fantastic at that. But when an offensive lineman can get their hands on him as he's ducking under, he gets shoved to the ground. And again, that's with most defensive edges. But again, it's always that size is a question mark for me. But I think this dude, to me, I really like. I like him at the back end of the first round. But again, that size I think offers a lot. His arm length is great. Getting that first hand onto the tackle, which I think Nolan Smith doesn't offer because he's not as tall. But again, I think he's a rusher. This guy is not good in the run game. And again, maybe average. I guess not good. I have him graded a C+ in run defending. And again, this guy lacks a power profile. This guy's not a bull rusher, which I think takes away from his game a lot, because he's not getting that straight line to the quarterback, which obviously is the most effective way, which is what Tyree Wilson can do, which is what Will Anderson can do. So I think it takes away from his game a little bit. But again, you're just not going to be able to get that unless you put on 10, 20 pounds, which is almost impossible. You never know.
It's true.
I think it takes away, he will be drafted for what he offers, which is that bend, which is that speed, which is that ability to get around tackles and get them misstepped. So I really like him, though.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just to wrap up the McDonald versus Nolan Smith argument, I think that Nolan Smith clearly has the higher upside of the two players.
Yeah.
More potential. I think he'll probably get drafted before McDonald because of that.
Definitely.
But McDonald's a first-round prospect. He's one of those guys you know what you're going to get.
I feel like
I think he'll be...
Yeah.
And he may not end up in the first round, but I think for me this would be a first-round player. And I think you know what you're going to get when you draft someone like this. I think he's going to offer good third-down pressure on the quarterback. And that might be it. I think in terms of production in the first year, maybe match him to someone like George Karlaftis. I know they're very different players. Karlaftis has about 30 pounds on him. But I mean, in terms of production, in terms of the way they played, I think this is a Karlaftis production type player for this first season.
There we have it. And we'll move on now. I want to talk about who you have at 5. So we both have at 5. I have Derek Hall at 5. You have Myles Murphy at 5. And we can talk about both. I feel like we might as well just talk about both because, there we go. And I have some strong opinions about Myles Murphy. But let's talk about Myles Murphy first. So, I guess, why is he your 5? Because this dude was compared to Rashawn Gary, Von Miller, and I just didn't see it at all this year. I guess 2022, you saw a little more. I don't think this guy is a top 5 prospect. I think he's barely first round.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly. I have Myles Murphy as my number 5 edge rusher purely based off of talent.
Yeah.
This is, at the start of the season, this guy was mocked in the top 5, top 10 picks. He was up there with Will Anderson, ahead of Tyree Wilson. This guy was phenomenal last year. I think we saw some problems this year, and I don't know why they showed up, but I'm going to keep it brief with Myles Murphy. I think this guy is potentially the second most, probably the second most talented player at edge rusher in this year's draft class. The problem is going to be the work rate. I saw some things. It's just going to be teams are going to hold interviews, and they're going to have to see whether or not he really loves football and whether or not he really wants to play football. And I think if he can figure it out and he can get back to the way he was playing in that 2021-22 season, this will be a could be a really dominant edge rusher in years to come.
Yeah.
I think this guy, talent alone, and standing at 6'5", 268, he almost matches the physical prowess of Tyree Wilson, and he's smart. He's talented. The problem is just going to be work rate, work ethic, and whether or not he really wants to be out on that field.
And again, I see it. I saw the flashes. I definitely saw the flashes with Myles Murphy, but I think it's very similar to if you guys saw our last Path to the Draft episode where we talked about Smith and Jigba, a guy who a lot of people have high and we just didn't. I think Myles Murphy is kind of similar there, where a guy who a lot of people love and I just don't as much. I think, again, wouldn't be surprised if he was taken in the first round. I probably would have a late, I would obviously definitely second round, but I think I would have a late first, early second round grade on him just because I feel like, I don't know, I don't love what he offers at the next level. I think there are a lot of guys who offer more, and I don't think he has that trait that sets him above all of them. Like, he's pretty good at everything, but not elite.
I strictly think that Myles Murphy, if he's there on, if he's there at the back end of the second round or early third round, he is a must take. He's just. I don't see this guy falling past the second round because of the talent. Because of the talent that is just apparent. This is someone you have to take a risk on. I'm sure so many teams hosted interviews with him. If you had a good interview with this guy, this is a talented football player. And he won't just be a role player at the next level if he can figure it out. And he will be, this could be a guy who's consistently getting you 10 sacks a season a few years down the line.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about quickly who I have at my 5, which is Derek Hall out of Auburn, a guy who I was really struggling between 5 and 4. I ended up putting Will McDonald at 4. I love Derek Hall. I think, weirdly, he's like when you look at the pro comp, it's like Will Anderson, kind of. He's a poor man's Will Anderson. They measured exactly the same, 35.5-inch arms, same height, 254 pounds, like very similar profiles. This dude, to me, what makes him stand out is his hand placement. He always gets his hand out first. You look at his ability, and especially against Alabama, if you go back, look at the tape there, his ability to get the hand out, bull rush the guy back, which is fantastic. Again, this guy is going to be a true bull rusher. I love his rip to bend kind of play style. But yeah, definitely a bull rushing profile player, which I really like. I think the bull rusher guys in this class definitely I like a little bit more, and the reason I put him ahead of Myles Murphy is just that ability. I think this guy could be a very highly productive player at the next level. Really, obviously jacked, 34.5-inch arms, great height at 6'3", good weight, powerful, can get, speed to power well. Obviously, Will Anderson is the peak of that, and I think Derek Hall is just a little bit less than that. So I think it's kind of if you don't get one guy, get the other. Obviously, it'll be Will Anderson. If you don't get Will Anderson, you'll get Derek Hall. But I really like him out of Auburn, a guy who obviously is a senior, so has that kind of maturity that we see. Obviously, also Will McDonald, 24 years old, which,
23, I believe.
I think he's 24 now, if you look it up. But yeah, I really like him. But I think the tight hips a little bit is a little bit of an issue. Not a great run defender. And the tackling I didn't love. I think he misses, and I think he's a little too jumpy. And again, I think he's the kind of guy where he's in the pocket, gets past the tackle. If the quarterback can kind of do a sidestep, and he goes flying. So again, it's all about refining that, being able to be more fluid in the game. So I think what kind of set him back is the fluidity a little bit, where Will Anderson has, I think Nolan Smith has, McDonald has. So I think that's why I would argue Myles Murphy probably has more fluidity than Derek Hall, but I really liked him. I think this dude is a first-round pick in my opinion. I think he will be drafted in the second round. I think that's what his value to teams is. I have him at an 85 grade. And I think just for pro comp, which I think is interesting, I kind of want to hear your reaction. I have him at a poor man's Joey Bosa. I'm not sure how much you've watched of Derek Hall, but I kind of watch the player, and I just kind of think in my head, I go through as many players as I can and kind of try and match them. And I think when you look at Joey Bosa, great arm length, great at pushing back. Obviously, Joey Bosa is much better, more refined, much better run defender. But I think I saw some similarities there. Obviously, if Derek Hall pans out to be that good, that would be quite a fine for whatever NFL team gets him.
So I'm sorry, I have to do this to you because you did it to me with Will McDonald. But
Here it is.
You hinted at Derek Hall. You really love him because he's got this power rush, and you love power rushers in this year's draft class. You have Nolan Smith ahead of Tyree Wilson.
Yeah. I'm saying I like the power rush mold a little more because I think they'll be more productive. I think Nolan Smith is a better run defender. Like I said, I think this guy will be drafted to be a run defender. But again, he had those moments at getting to the quarterback, and I think what he offers is that speed, that bend, where Darren Hall is straight line to the quarterback. So I think they offer different things. I like Nolan Smith more. I like the upside more, and I think he will translate more. Again, I guess you could say, year one, I think they'll be similar. Maybe you could give Derek Hall the edge, but I think Nolan Smith is a more refined prospect, where Derek Hall, I think, lacks a little bit of the fluidity, which I value in edge rushers.
Right. I haven't watched a lot of Derek Hall. I can't lie. I don't think I've watched any Derek Hall except for the games that I've watched that Auburn was playing in, which can't be very many, maybe one or two. But for me, Derek Hall, what I've heard, what I've seen, it's a solid player. This is a day 2 player, for sure. I would not go as far as to take him in the first round. That's me personally.
Yeah.
But, haven't watched a lot. Don't know that much about this guy. He is a slightly less discovered player in this draft class. I think when you look at the top 5, top 6 names, he's just not a name that comes up as frequently. But for me, this is definitely a day 2 guy. That's locked in for me for sure. Gonna be graded somewhere between that 75 to 80 range if I had to guess for me. But yeah, I mean, I like to take of Derek Hall at number 5. And if I can just bring up really quickly, Lucas Van Ness is not in either of our top 5s.
Yeah.
And I don't believe he's in Surge's top 5.
Yeah.
I don't know about Dylan if he even has one right now. But
and we talked about it because the Danny Jeremiah mock reaction, which we talked about again.
I guess to keep it really, really brief, this is a guy who didn't even start in college. So how is he going to start in the NFL?
Yeah.
He racked up some good numbers, but clearly not good enough to earn a starting job at Iowa. He's just not excellent.
Yeah.
I think he's a fine player.
I mean,
he's actually a solid player.
He's a guy where if you don't land Tyree Wilson, I think Van Ness will get taken. I think Van Ness
6'5",
will be
272 is huge. This
Yeah,
guy,
he's
guy's gonna get drafted in the first round.
He's a power rusher, and I think he could be taken high. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm just not sold.
Couldn't pan out. Yeah, I don't think either of us are sold. This guy's a sophomore, only played a couple years at Iowa, neither of which he started. So
move on now to we're gonna implement these in each Path to the Draft episode. Team mock drafts. We're kind of be doing 2-round, giving our best fits for that team. And first, we're going to do me and Charlie's favorite team. As you can see, very fitting that we have the Giants poster in the background. We'll be giving you a Giants mock draft, giving our kind of first, our 2-round mock draft around there. But Charlie, I go to you first. Obviously, you're very indulged in this. We both are. But obviously, the Giants' first-round pick, only one in the first round. Later, we're 25, right?
25.
25. Who do you like them to take there? Because there's a wide spectrum. You could go receiver. You could go edge. You could go corner. You could go offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman. I think, really, I don't know what they're going to go with here, but what is your take?
No, I actually really like this pick. I'm going to be honest. I think this is one of the better years to be drafting at the back end of the first round.
Yeah,
I think the receivers are going to fall towards that back end of the first round. I think some of the top players in this draft, potentially an edge rusher or two, drops to that back end. Inside offensive line, you've got guys like Osiris Torrance, Luke Weipler, potentially. I actually really like the back end of this first round. Even corners. You look at guys like we'll talk about corners later, so I'm not going to bring up corners right now. And this is a spot where I actually don't have the Giants taking a corner. At pick 25, for me, this is an easy one. I think I'm going with one of 2 guys, and that's receiver out of Boston College, Zay Flowers. Giants lost Richie James. Giants lost Kenny Galladay and Kadarius Toney. And I think, with Wan'Dale Robinson coming back from injury, Zay Flowers could be a nice addition to that offense. Obviously, though, they signed Paris Campbell, re-signed Darius Slayton, re-signed Sterling Shepard, signed Jeff Smith, signed someone older, a lot. Jamison Crowder.
Yeah.
So for me, the best pick would not be Zay Flowers. I think I would like that pick, but for me, the one guy I would take at this pick if he falls there is out of Florida, Osiris Torrance.
Yeah, I love him.
We have not talked about offensive linemen yet in this path to the draft, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek. Osiris Torrance is my number 5 player so far in this NFL draft class. And I think he won't get taken earlier because he's a guard. I think that's the only reason. This guy is excellent out of Florida. He's got the size. He's got the skill. The Giants need an offensive lineman, an interior offensive lineman. Especially, we lost Nick Gates. We lost John Feliciano, both starters on that interior of the offensive line. Need to replace one. Osiris Torrance is the guy.
I love the pick with Osiris Torrance. I think Zay Flowers is a little bit like, obviously when we talked about receivers last episode, you compared him to Wan'Dale Robinson. I think a guy Quentin Johnson, who we might see fall, I would love the pick there just because he's a true number one guy. He's like Kenny Golladay with the size.
Yeah, totally get it.
I would love Jordan Addison if he falls, but I love Zay Flowers. I just think that gives us a smaller receiver room where you kind of want a target guy, which I guess Slayton is.
I mean, Isaiah Hodgins emerged as that player for us last season, and Darius Slayton's big.
I think there are guys there. I would have no problem with Zay Flowers, but I do like the pick there. I think first round, I think it's either, I agree, Osiris Torrance or Zay Flowers, and I think maybe we like Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State at corner. Maybe if one of those high-end top 5 corners falls, like maybe a Joey Porter, Deontay Banks, we go there. But I really do like the wide receiver inside offensive line selection.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll go to the second round now. Who do you like there?
The second round, this might be my favorite pick for the Giants here. And this isn't if he falls. I think this is a guy we could see go in the first round. So if the Giants see him at pick 57, I think we'd be really lucky. But I think it's definitely possible because at linebacker, Drew Sanders out of Arkansas. I really like this guy. I haven't watched a lot of film yet, but I'm excited to dive into his film. This is a big, physical linebacker who, excellent tackler, excellent in coverage, great run defense. This is the best linebacker in this year's draft class. I've seen, like a Trenton Simpson comparison. I like Drew Sanders so much more than Trenton Simpson. I think this is an easy Drew Sanders one for me. I think Trenton Simpson had the same problem as we talked about Miles Murphy earlier. Talented guy, but I don't know if he'll get it done in the NFL. I think Drew Sanders could translate to the NFL very easily, and he is a big physical presence. I really like Drew Sanders at Arkansas.
Yeah, I like it. I think linebacker's a smart pick. I think we do need kind of a field manager there.
I mean, we signed Bobby Okereke, which I think was a great signing, but someone to go sit behind him, sit right next to him. Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. I think we
need a sideline guy. Again, I haven't done my linebacker rankings yet, but I think Trenton Simpson will be my number one guy just because he's a freak athlete, which I think the Giants never really have had on the defense, at least the back end of that defense. And I think Trenton Simpson, good in coverage. I haven't seen much of Drew Sanders, but I've heard the same things you've said. So I think linebacker there is a good pick. So I like it a lot. But I guess we'll go into kind of the third round pick you have here because I do like it. And this is a guy who a lot of them have taking first round, sometimes second round, and that's obviously who you have, Lucas Weiler or Weipler.
Luke Weipler, yep.
Out of Ohio State. What interests you about him for the Giants?
Again, this is more of a scheme fit. I actually really like Luke Weipler. Didn't do a lot of scouting on him. Centers like. Yeah. Do we really care that much? I'm trying to focus my time elsewhere for you guys, but I really like Luke Weipler. I did a lot on Osiris Torrance, but Luke Weipler's a guy who I have seen mocked in the first round, but I think is an unlikely first round pick.
I was mixing him up with the Wisconsin interior offensive lineman. I'm forgetting his name, who I've seen the Giants draft.
Joe Tippmann.
Joe Tippmann, yeah. So
that is a player that I dislike strongly, by the way. Not a first round pick. That's like the Cole Strange pick of this year's draft. Yeah. But for me, Luke Weipler, I think if he falls to the third round, I think it's an easy pick for the Giants. If you add Osiris Torrance and then you put right next to him, right in the interior, right in the heart of that O-line, Luke Weipler, you've got a really young, really good offensive line to build for Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. I think, I've talked to my dad about this. He's, knows enough about football. He's a Giants fan, and he can tell watching these games. Like, we can all tell the offensive line just sucks.
Yeah.
It was an improvement last year, especially on Andrew Thomas, but we need more improvement, especially losing Nick Gates and John Feliciano, who are both starters. That's why I have Torrance and Luke Weipler in the third round.
I like it. Welcome, everybody, to the new segment, Sell the Prospect. Each of us will have 30 seconds to sell you a single prospect. We're going to sell it to each other as well. So, they're generally guys who one of us don't like. We have 2 prospects. Each of us have 30 seconds to present your case like Shark Tank to the other person. Charlie, you're going first, and your timer starts now.
Kelly Ringo. I know you're not high on Kelly Ringo. You think he'll translate to a safety in the NFL. Talk about prototypical size, prototypical weight, 6'2", 207, and he runs really well. Mid 4.3s, one of the faster corners in this draft class, and has all the ball skills to be a man-to-man corner at the next level. Press coverage, receivers are going to struggle. With his size, it's going to be difficult. He is a super raw prospect, so I see not liking him, but if that translates to the NFL, that will translate unbelievably well. The potential is sky high. We saw at the start of the season, he was mocked as potentially even the number 1 corner in this draft class, and I think we saw it this year. I think he played very, very well. Not excellent, not as good as some of the top guys, but Kelly Ringo is an outstanding prospect. Not as good right now as the top, But in terms of potential, this guy's at the top of the board.
There we go. All right. My timer starts now. My guy's Tank Dell out of Houston, receiver, small guy, 5'8", 163. I have him as my 6th ranked receiver. I think this dude is the best route runner in the class. You look at, as a player, this dude is so polished. I think he's an elite route runner. His release to me is fantastic. Again, a guy who showed out at the Senior Bowl, a guy who was arguably the best receiver there. You look at him just burning corners, his first step, that kind of hezzy step like we talked about a lot with some of the other receivers. That ability to create that foot of separation, I think to me will translate so well to the NFL. Obviously, this is not a jump ball receiver because of his size. I think this guy has fantastic instincts. I think his route tree is very, very wide compared to some of the other receivers who are above him, who have more restricted route trees. I absolutely love him. All right. Let us know if we sold the prospect to you. Let us know if you're sold on them, if we did a good job. All right, we're going to move on now to our next top 5 positional rankings, and we're going to go for cornerback. Obviously, this is, to me, one of the best cornerback groups I've seen in a long time. However, they don't have like the Patrick Surtain, Derek
definitely not
Stingley type guy, but they're very good. Like, it's not like the receiver class where there's no like elite. They have, this corner class has obviously fantastic elite prospects. Me and Charlie are very similar when it goes into corners. We have all the same players in our top 5. The rankings are just a little bit different, but our number one guy, a guy who we both love, is Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois. I mean, this dude to me is a lockdown island. Like, this dude is a lockdown corner. Obviously, I would have loved to see him measure in at that 6 foot at the combine. He was measuring at 5'11 and a half. But again, corners to me, that's not as big of a deal. This dude, I think, is a dominant man-to-man press coverage corner. This dude will put guys on an island. I have the comp. People compare him to Denzel Ward, to Jair Alexander, the elite man coverage corners in the NFL. Like, guys who shut down the other side of the field. I think Devon Witherspoon can 100% be that. His instincts are fantastic. He's good at tackling. He can affect in the run game. I think this dude offers so much to an NFL team. I think this guy could be a day one starter. I would assume he'll be the cornerback 2 to start, but I think this guy could step into a cornerback 1 role and be fantastic. And it was an Illinois secondary that was great this year. Really good safety. Obviously, another good corner to the opposite side of him. I absolutely love Devon Witherspoon.
Yeah, I agree with you. I looked at a bunch of corners today. I was going into it thinking Christian Gonzalez, this is my number one guy, Christian Gonzalez. But Devon Witherspoon, watching his tape, I don't see how you could have him anywhere but 1. This is a guy who I believe was maybe number 4 coming into the year.
Yeah.
Maybe 5, maybe even 6. Climbed astronomically.
Probably even unranked. I mean, Illinois.
Graded super high. This guy, phenomenal. Mm-hmm. I think, for me, his one attribute that stands out so much to me is his instincts. Mm-hmm. Instinctual corner. I kind of disagree with you about the whole man coverage, zone coverage thing. I know you don't have his zone coverage grade very high. I actually almost prefer Devon Witherspoon in zone coverage. Watching Witherspoon's tape, man coverage, this is a phenomenal corner. Mm. He runs 90% of the routes for the receiver. He just does it. And that's the thing. He senses the break. The instincts are there. That's the thing. And he makes the break before the receiver.
I love there's kind of a new term going around. I have it in my grade as route squeeze. So that ability when they make that cut to close the route, which I think
he does it so well.
I think that's the most important trait. Besides against the man coverage, the ability to, when they make that break, to squeeze the route in and get back to the receiver. I have him A+ grade for that. I think he's the best at that in the class. Gonzalez is right at it, which I think that to me was what separated them. I think they're very similar. But to me, Witherspoon, that route squeeze, that ability to stay with the receiver the whole time was just blew my mind.
No, definitely. I mean, for me, the route squeeze, the part that stands out the most is he squeezes that route and he gets on it right at the first break, but he doesn't get fooled by the second one.
Yeah.
And I think you see a lot of corners at this level. I think as you go further down in the list, guys like Cam Smith, Clark Phillips, Kelly Ringo, Deontay Banks, Eli Ricks, Julius Brents, all these guys are really solid corners right now, and they have good route squeeze. They get there on that break, but then they're susceptible to double move over the top. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about that with Witherspoon. He's going to jump the route, but then he has the recovery speed, the recovery ability to follow the receiver upfield. I believe it was one player in particular, I don't remember who it was against, but the quarterback was forced out of the pocket, motions the receiver upfield, the receiver turns, and this is a quick receiver, gets out into the end zone, and Witherspoon's step for step with him after this was an out route that was turned into a double move. I love Devon Witherspoon. The instincts are what stands out for me, and that's why I like him in zone coverage so much. He's got the ability to be standing. He lines up outside. Two receivers with in-breaking routes. He doesn't have to worry about either of them. He picks up the running back, and then you've got a receiver coming all the way across the field who is all the way on the other side of the field. He's able to recognize that, acknowledge that, and make the play, make the interception, just make the play, get that ball out of the receiver's hands. 14 passes defended this year. That's the most of any corner, I believe, in college football this year.
Fantastic.
And this guy is just a phenomenal player.
No, you know who actually had more? We'll talk about it. We'll talk. It'll surprise some people. But number 2, we have the same Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. I mean, as prototypical as it gets for a corner. Like this dude, 6'1", 197, not skinny, not slim, great height. I really like Christian Gonzalez. And again, we talked about it. What separated from me was that route squeeze a little bit. I think Gonzalez has better instincts than Witherspoon. I think it's very similar. I think it's close. But I think you look at his game. Obviously, he played for 2 years at Boulder, at Colorado, transferred for his last year at Oregon. You look at his game. It's just one of those things, like you said, that quarterback motions. He's able to read the quarterback's eyes, I think, best in the class. You saw that against Colorado with one of his interceptions where he just knows where the quarterback is going to go. This dude, I think, is the most fluid corner in the class. You look at his hips. You look at his footwork, his foot speed. It is absolutely fantastic. And all these I think the top 4 guys are all, I think, going to go into the league and be elite corners, or at least be guys who will start day one. I think Gonzalez obviously is that guy. I really like Gonzalez' ideal size. I don't have much to say about him. He's fantastic. And again, I think the play speed is the only thing that can be improved upon. I think he might struggle with that a little bit, but he's a guy you're going to put him on your number 1 receiver. He has the size, the length, the instincts. His ball skills are fantastic. I think this guy is the full package. I just think Witherspoon, to me, and I think it even comes down to just who we like a little bit more, but I think Witherspoon, that route squeeze, which I find very important, he just kind of has a little bit more than Gonzalez.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as I said, I was expecting to love Gonzalez, and I'm actually going to disagree with you. I was not in love with Christian Gonzalez's tape.
And I'm very open to that. Like, I liked it, but again, that's why I didn't have that one, because I wasn't like, yeah, this is... Like, I see the Patrick Surtain comparison. I'm like, where do you see that?
It's not there.
Yeah.
It's not there. He has good ball skills, 4 interceptions last year. Prototypical size, it's 6'1", 197. And I wasn't in love. I know you talk about the instincts, but it didn't match Devon Witherspoon for me. Witherspoon, I can't believe I didn't bring this up at all, but is the hardest hitter in this draft class, not just for corners. Mm-hmm. Witherspoon is the guy who will step up and absolutely crush any receiver. Gonzalez didn't have that. In zone coverage, Gonzalez showed just the slightest bit of hesitancy. I saw it. I saw a couple people say it. Just a little bit of hesitancy with... not that he wasn't reading the route, but he wasn't reacting to it as fast as as we were hoping, as fast as Witherspoon is able to. That's why I have Witherspoon first. I was really thinking I would have Gonzalez over Witherspoon, but it's very clear to me that Witherspoon's the better corner than Christian Gonzalez. Gonzalez is great. Don't get me wrong. This is a man coverage corner. I love him in man coverage. He's going to lock up just about any receiver he faces, and he's got great technique. I think his technique is the one spot where he beats out Witherspoon a little bit. I think this is a press coverage corner where Witherspoon is not as good in press coverage.
Yeah,
Gonzalez makes up for it, but I think all in all, Witherspoon is the most well-rounded corner in this class when you combine man coverage, zone coverage, instincts, speed, size, technique, tackling. Gonzalez, I think the biggest place where he lacks is his tackling. Mm-hmm. He's been susceptible to miss a few tackles. That's the one spot where I'm not in love with Gonzalez. But I do really like the player.
There we go. And again, number 3, we have the same. I think these top 3 are the top 3 guys. And that's Joey Porter out of Penn State. You talk about ideal size. The most ideal size in this class. 6'2", 193. This guy to me, but outside of the other guys we're talking about, I think he's the least athletic. I think the other guys have a little bit, they have the step athletically, but This guy is going to be a man coverage corner like these other guys. Like this guy, to me, lines up more. I think Gonzalez has that better press. I would agree. I think Gonzalez might be the best press cover guy. He's more of an off cover dude, but instincts fantastic. Really, really good ball skills. I think he's really good at the catch point. Like this dude was really good at breaking up catches up top. I haven't graded very well. I haven't really solid. I think the run defending isn't great. I didn't see much of his tackling. Not to say that he's not good at it. I just didn't think he wasn't as involved as Witherspoon, because I guess Gonzalez wasn't as involved in the run game and tackling wise. But the route squeeze to me was a little bit what separated him. I think he's a little slower. I was watching him against Purdue. I was watching his Purdue game, and just there was a couple snaps where I'm not sure what his name is. He's a white receiver who transferred from Iowa State to Purdue. He's a draft prospect this year. He's really good, and he just got the better of him in some of that, where it's just that break or
Charlie
that comeback
Jones.
route. Yeah, Charlie Jones. There we go, Charlie. That comeback route. He just is a little slower than the other two to squeeze that route. But I love him. I really like Joey Porter. I think this guy will be. I love him as a fit for the Steelers, and to me, he's that dominant, will talk trash to you type corner, like that elite alpha mentality, which I love from corners. Which I don't think Gonzalez has as much. I think Witherspoon definitely has it, but I do like Joey Porter.
I'm with you. I don't think I like Joey Porter nearly as much as you do. I don't know how our grades stack up.
I guess I was very optimistic. I'm not. I guess I was very optimistic. I think we're similar. Like, I don't love him. I was talking very highly about him, but I'm not like, oh, Joey Porter, like I'm taking guys over him.
But this is the guy who, you've got Witherspoon, you've got Gonzalez, Gonzalez, Porter.
Yeah.
He's a really good player, and he's clearly my number 3, but it's not the same. You're getting a much better deal out of these top 2 guys. I think Witherspoon in particular has the potential to be this year's Sauce Gardner, Pat Surtain, be that dominant. This is Defensive Player of the Year material. Mm-hmm. Same with Christian Gonzalez. But for me, the concern with Joey Porter is somehow at 22 years old, he feels too raw to me.
Really?
I was not a fan. Christian Gonzalez at 20 felt like an NFL ready player, and that's why he's headed into the draft. Joey Porter at 22, a junior playing for Penn State, 2 years of experience, had 0 picks last year. Leaves questions about ball skills, leaves questions about the catch point. He had 11 pass breakups, which is really good. Second to Devon Witherspoon that I can see. But it was just a little raw. It felt like the technique wasn't all there, and I think that's what happens when you've got a 6'3" corner. We see it with Tariq Woolen. I don't think it's necessarily going to impact his game. Tariq Woolen at 6'4", runs super fast. Not the best technique corner. Had a phenomenal year. Personally think was robbed of Defensive Rookie of the Year. But I think that Tariq Woolen was fantastic, and I think Joey Porter has the potential to be just as good at 6'3". But he felt a little raw. The hands, he was getting the breakups, he was getting up to the catch point, he was beating receivers to the ball, but not securing it. He's dropping the ball when it counts. And I don't know that all of them were necessarily drops, but 11 pass breakups, he was targeted a decent amount. You would expect at least 1 or 2 picks from him. Both of the guys ahead of him, everybody else I've graded had at least 1 interception this year. And to have no picks just kind of throws me off a little bit about him. The technique's not fantastic. Tackling is there. The size is there. I think he's a very good man coverage corner. He's going to be able to run and jump with the best of the receivers.
Yeah.
For me, it was just weirdly, and I agree, this was strange. He was just weirdly a little bit raw. I think he needs to learn this is not a day one outside corner for me.
I think he is, but I do see the gap. Like, I think there is definitely a gap between Gonzalez and Witherspoon. And when I go back, and by the time the draft comes around, I might have the guy we're about to talk about next, which is Deonte Banks out of Maryland, ahead of Joey Porter. This dude athletically was built in a lab. 6 feet, almost 200 pounds. This dude is fantastic. And to me, what I love most about him, the route squeeze is good. I have him at about a B+. It's the breaks. The ability to read a break and to mirror route breaks was fantastic from Deonte Banks. I really liked him. I could very much see me putting him ahead of Porter by the end. But again, I think what really offers a lot about him is, again, I guess we differentiate on this. I think Witherspoon is much more man. I think Gonzalez is much more man. I think Deonte Banks can play them all very well, but he can't play man as at high of a level. Like if I were to give Devon Witherspoon an A+, Gonzalez an A, I would give Banks a B and a B on both, or a B+ and a B+. I think he's very sound. And I think teams will look at that like we can put him in if we have different schemes. He is a very friendly player, a very scheme-friendly player. Incredible athleticism. His foot speed was one of the top in the class. And I think to me, this dude, if again, I think he might be more of an ideal starting corner for me than a guy like Joey Porter. I love my pro comp. I'm very proud of this, of Tyson Campbell, who was drafted last year out of Georgia. I think they
love
are
Tyson
very
Campbell.
similar size. And Deonte Banks to me, I love. Young, 21 years old, junior, played really well, kind of stood his ground. I was watching his game against Ohio State. Obviously, I think to me penalties are a little bit of a question mark when he goes up against elite guys. Like we saw that a lot against Marvin Harrison, the Ohio State receiver, who will be the easy number one if I were to predict next year. But I really like him. I think Deonte Banks is a guy who doesn't have a lot of holes, and I think this guy's a first-round pick. I think he'll be a middle to back-end guy if I were to assume, but I really, really like him, and I think teams will like him as well.
Yeah, for sure. I've got Deonte Banks at my 5. I've got him just behind this other guy. And for me, this other guy, we'll talk about in a second. But for me, it's, again, as I said, it's Witherspoon and Gonzalez, Porter and Forbes, who's my number 4, and then Deonte Banks.
And Forbes we'll talk about next.
For me, I like Forbes, I think, a lot more than you do. Forbes is a very slight build. We'll talk about him in a second. But Deonte Banks, again, 197. He weighs the same as corners who are 2-3 inches taller than him. And I think...
And speedy. Ran a 4.35.
Super fast.
Really fast.
But for me, when you talk about, built in a lab, super fast, I'm looking at a guy like Kelly Ringo. So I don't think that...
I agree Kelly Ringo's the same.
I don't think that Deonte Banks really holds much over Kelly Ringo. I've got them graded the same. Same with Cam Smith. Same with Clark Phillips. I think this is a sweet spot for corners. I think I have a lot of them graded right around 80. This is Deonte Banks, Kelly Ringo, Cam Smith, Clark Phillips, the third are all ranked at an 80. And I think I just picked Deonte Banks because I agree with you. I think this is a good outside corner who I think he'll just be a solid start. I don't think he has the potential that these other guys have.
I think the potential is not as much there as a guy like, we'll talk about Emmanuel Forbes next, Porter, Gonzalez, and Witherspoon, but I do really, really like him. But let's switch over to Emmanuel Forbes, who I'm fascinated by. I really like him. Obviously, Mississippi State, again, a guy who measured at the combine at 6'1", 166 pounds, which is that's very, very slight. Again, he was able to work off it. He knows what he's good at. This dude is the best ball skills in the class.
Oh, yeah.
33 pass breakups in his college career. I got that wrong. I thought that was this year. That would have been absurd. That
would be pretty crazy.
33 pass breakups and 14 interceptions.
6 of those coming this year.
Yeah, this dude, to me, ball skills-wise, fantastic. But this dude is very, very not scheme-friendly. This dude's a zone coverage corner. This guy is not a man coverage corner. This dude cannot press because he will get either blown by at the line of scrimmage. He can get pushed over. This dude can get deleted from plays. He's a Vic Fangio defense-like player. He needs to play very zone-heavy. That's why I have the fit at the Bears, Packers, Cardinals, all teams that are the most zone coverage type teams. They run the most zone. Obviously, Cardinals lost Byron Murphy. I think Forbes would be fantastic fit there. I think this guy's a top-end cornerback too. I would assume he goes to a team and they're going to make him put on weight. I guess you don't know. Very slim, but really good hands. He has very good hands. Really good at catching, which is very surprising. But again, not a very good tackler. I'm at a D+ on tackling, which is the lowest I have of the top 5. D to me is concerning. But I really like him. I'm interested to hear what you say because I've been watching a bunch of videos and just I don't have I have a slim Darius Slay as my pro comp for him just because of the ball skills. But this dude to me, there's no guy you've never seen a corner with this size.
You don't see a 6'1", 166 pound person very often. This guy's a football player, and I think that I actually disagree with you a little bit on the coverage versatility. I think zone coverage is obviously preferred, but I think the only problems with man coverage is the press coverage. I think he's a guy who can play man coverage. He can do it well, not as well as the press.
I don't know. I agree.
As the zone,
have to be off. But I think
it's off coverage, man coverage. I think he'll be fine. Zone coverage, he'll excel and he will get picks. We've seen it.
It's just he's so heavy because I think zone coverage is friendlier for guys like him getting picks. Because he can kind of get off his coverage. His instincts are great. I'm an A for instincts. I think all these corners, all the top 5 have very good instincts. But again, a guy, you look at the picks he made, like Will Levis, again, what's really funny, actually, I was watching a lot of the corners I was watching when they played Kentucky. It showed a lot of flaws about Will Levis, who we really liked. Just kind of stupid throws, but through a screen, and Forbes picked it off. Like, that instinct to know where the ball is going to go, pick six, change the game. It was late in the game. I think Forbes is a game changer. I really like him. Sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, totally. I think the thing that sets him aside from the guys I listed earlier, Banks, Ringo, Smith, and Phillips, is his technique and his hands.
Yeah.
He's got great ball skills. We talked about that, but it's his technique that I think makes up for his lack of ability in man coverage. I think he's not your preferred man coverage corner, but as a quarters corner or as a hard flat corner, I think this guy will excel because he's got the technique to play it all. I think even in man coverage, you put him in off coverage, he's got the technique, he's got the instincts to play it.
Yeah.
It won't be the preferred option. They'll be putting him in a lot of zone, but no team runs 100% zone. And I think that for Forbes, it's not going to be – teams are not going to say, when I'm not playing zone coverage, I'm taking Forbes off the field because it's not a liability.
I don't know. I think it is. I think it's a big liability for – again, I guess it depends. I think maybe you can run a kind of a man zone type of scheme, but I think this dude needs to be put in a very specific type of defense. And I think he can excel, but I think if he's put in the wrong defense, this guy will be exposed, especially in his rookie year.
Yeah, I mean, again, I agree. I guess the versatility is not as good as these top few guys, but I really like Emmanuel Forbes, and I think he's not a liability at all.
I'm just really interested in him. Like, I love his build, and I love what he offers. And obviously, who doesn't like a corner who's getting 14 interceptions in his college career, a guy who can turn over the ball and change games. But that rounds out the top five. I think it's a good top five list. Me and Charlie were talking about before, when we were doing our rankings, just there, and I said to Charlie, like, there are so many guys I want to put in this top five. Like, I really, really like this corner class. I love Julius Brents. I love Clark Phillips. I really like DJ Turner. Not as high on Keely Ringo, obviously, and Cam Smith, but there are just so many guys. I really like Eli Ricks. Like, Eli Ricks, a guy out of LSU, was arguably the best cornerback as a freshman.
Yeah.
Was a guy who, we talked about Derek Stingley last year. I had now PFF analyst Max Chadwick on the show, and he was like, yeah, watch out for Eli Ricks, a guy who will be, a top pick. Obviously isn't transferred to Alabama, not as good of a season, but I think Eli Ricks will be a steal in that second, third round. I think this corner class is fantastic, and obviously we'll record more content. We'll break down more players who we obviously didn't talk about in this top 10, but we'll move on now to another team mock draft, staying in the NFC East. We're going to go to the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously Super Bowl contenders, Super Bowl participants this past year, went 14-3, 2 first-round picks. I mean, this team is set up for success. They have the luxury of 2 first-round picks. But when you look at the first one, which they have at number 10, who do you think is the best fit for the Eagles?
This is easy for me. It's either Christian Gonzalez or Devon Witherspoon.
Okay.
I think they can't go wrong with either of those players. The only concern is one of them's not going to make it to 10. I think
arguably both. I've seen a lot of people. I think the Lions will take a corner. I think the Raiders might take a corner.
I think it's arguable that both of them are gone. I think one of them will probably be there at 10, and that's the one they have to take. And if neither of them are there, I actually wouldn't take corner at all. Because I don't think Joey Porter or Emmanuel Forbes are set to be a top 10 overall pick. And I think with that pick number 30, they could draft an Emmanuel Forbes or a Deonte Banks in the back end of the first round. But for me, that first pick is going to go to Gonzalez or Witherspoon. What concerns me about the Eagles, is just they lost a lot of key players this year. Contenders last year, but Javon Hargrave, Andre Dillard, Miles Sanders, Isaac Sumalo, TJ Edwards, Marcus Epps, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Kazir White. That's a lot of starters.
Yeah, but I don't think so. I mean, they have so much depth already. Like, Javon Hargrave is not as much of a loss. They have a guy to fill in. Dillard, I think, he wasn't even a starter, though.
He was for most of the season because Lane Johnson was out. But he won't be this year.
Lane Johnson was the best tackle. I mean, he was...
No, he won't be a starter this year. But
Sumalo wasn't a starter either.
Sumalo was for a lot of the year.
Yeah, I might have injury. I just know depth chart wise that he was not generally a starter for them.
But I think Javon Hargrave was their best defensive tackle last year. They have guys who can step in like Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis. But Fletcher Cox signed a 1-year deal, won't be around for long, and Javon Hargrave was their best defensive tackle.
But that's the luxury because they now have the pick, and I think they knew that.
They do, and
let's move on. Obviously, who do you have as
the number 30 overall? I've got Mozzie Smith. That's a defensive tackle out of Michigan.
I like what I've watched. But for me, I think first round, I would think they'll probably go defensive line just because of how top heavy it is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. I've seen Lucas Van Ness draft a lot because he's a guy who hasn't started. He can learn behind. They obviously re-signed Brandon Graham. They have Hassan Reddick. I really like, maybe, again, imagine Jalen Carter falls. That would be absurd. But I think I like the defensive line pick there. But in the back end, yeah, I think Mozzie Smith is a good pick. And I think maybe you go safety there in that second round.
Yeah, I have safety going in the third round. In fact, I've got Texas A&M safety Antonio Johnson.
A guy who was mocked as one of the best defensive backs.
Early on, he was.
A guy we never talked about, we'll go back to the first round. Brian Branch, actually a guy who I've seen mocked a bunch.
I really like Brian Branch.
Only 100 snaps at safety, so a lot of people think he's more of a slot corner at the next level. And I think that versatility, obviously, they just lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's a safety, but got a lot of interceptions.
But played slot corner.
Played slot corner, so I think actually Brian Branch to me is, obviously we're Giants fans, so I don't want him to get
it's a really nice pick for them.
I think Brian Branch is a guy who will most likely fall back to either 30, maybe they take him at 10, or maybe they trade down from 10, and I think that's a guy who would fit very well into that team.
Definitely.
Yeah. But that'll do it. Episode 2. Let us know what you guys think. Obviously, we were more heavy on positional rankings. As always, comment down below any topics you want us to talk about. We'll try in the next episode talk more kind of topic-wise, not as much positional rankings. Obviously, stay tuned for all the clips we post. We post so much. We're going crazy. We're posting a ton on Instagram, TikTok. We're going to post clips from this on YouTube. Obviously, check out our first podcast if you haven't, because it's not like, they don't, it's irrelevant. It's obviously still makes a lot of sense. We still have top 5 positions, so check out that if you didn't. We're going to be trying to push out podcasts probably twice a week. Generally give 2-3 days buffer between each, but obviously we have only a few weeks until the NFL draft, April 27th. I didn't mention that in the beginning. April 27th, 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. NFL draft live stream. We did it last year. We're going to be doing it again. Live coverage for the first round. We have graphics. We talk to the chat. It's a ton of fun. We put a ton of work in it. So if you guys could stay tuned for that, make sure you do. But follow us on social media. Subscribe to the channel. Charlie Nidell, Kean McDermott. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. And we'll see you next time.